Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. To change to Spanish to make my presentation.
Distinguished delegates, it's an honor for us, the Dominican Republic, to be able to be part of this forum and tell you about our experience during the period of implementation of our Integrated National Financing Framework. In a global financial context that's challenging, and following this Sevilla commitment, I think we are all facing a common challenge of adapting actions that are mentioned in the agreement into concrete actions. And the Dominican Republic, to a certain extent, is part of the discussion process of the Sevilla commitment so that we can take a step forward, and we have already now our first draft of our INFF. The process of implementing the INFF was based on our national 2030 development strategy. That's a pioneering instrument, if I could call it that, because it was approved as a law in 2012, 3 years before the implementation of the 2030 agenda, and its structure is arranged around 4 areas of development: social, economic, environmental, and institutional. And it has 19 general goals and very many other targets within them. During the period of implementation of our national plan, we saw that despite the robust nature of the instrument in terms of its goals, what was still lacking was were the financial guidelines to ensure that the goals and targets could be achieved by 2030. And in the first years of the implementation, we saw also that this depended a lot on state resources, government resources, and also implementation of a number of non-government resolutions, which weren't necessarily overall corresponding to the national development strategy that we have between now and 2030. So the INFF has been a tool to help us with national funding and provide a more updated vision of how we can face our development challenges, updating then our national agenda, if you will. And also we have the Dominican Republic government has an ambition to double its funding by 2036. When it comes to the leadership of the Economy Ministry and with the technical assistance of UNDP and UNDESA and ECLAC, the process of our INFF has really become a useful tool that's made it possible for us to implement many programs. Amongst them, I'd like to highlight what the moderator referred to, the implementation of the political priorities agenda, for example. That would be a good example. Or our diagnostic of what cooperation for development should be and our strategic vision. And we also have a catalogue identifying 23 alternative forms of funding. Added to that are a number of activities that make up our financing strategy for development in the Dominican Republic. Based on our experience, we've learnt a number of lessons that I wanted to share with you here. Firstly, the implementation of the INFF works well when it's part of a solid institutional framework with existing planning with a long-term vision. This is very important for the process of implementation of the INFF. Secondly, the leadership of the government. Ownership by the government throughout the implementation process is key. And thirdly, but also just as important, you need to have tools that can give you quick wins during the process, such as the implementation of political priorities that can be a catalyst for political support, and also institutional ownership, and covering the technical aspects of the process is also very important. But there are issues we're facing at the moment. As we said, we now have the first draft of the implementation, and that is enabling us to have not just a diagnosis of the development funding for DR, but how we can really make this a reality by taking action. I'd like to highlight that building the strategy was a very ambitious project. From the first moment that we began this, we wanted to have a comprehensive project, not just financing for one sector then, but we wanted to reflect our entire national development strategy when we did this. And this really does reflect the Sevilla commitment. The scope covers public and private and international sources, and all of the international priority issues for our country. And then within that, we have we haven't just identified additional resourcing funding, but we also have a diagnosis of what the structural bottlenecks are that are preventing funding getting towards reaching national development priorities. And we don't just have recommendations for identifying resources, but we are carrying out structural reforms that are very important in order to correctly channel development funding. Looking at new sources of funding, for example, and also we have a separate chapter dedicated to the institutions for the program, ongoing institutions meeting, public-private partnerships, as well as international cooperation, standing committees. And what we're trying to achieve is to ensure that the funding strategy be part of the update of our post-2030 strategy, and that it will be legal in nature, our national development strategy. All of this progress, however, didn't just happen on its own. It's been assisted by the United Nations system, UNDP, UNICEF, DESA, and I'd like to highlight here that on the basis of what we've been doing up until now, I think that we have made a lot of progress, particularly with regard to SDG labelling. And we've also had the joint SDG funding with DESA, and we've been able to develop a language model so that we can automate the system of SDG labelling. By the end of this year, I think DR will have become a pioneer as well in using AI so that we can have multi-sectoral SDG labelling. Also, climate change, gender diversity are also important aspects that we're covering, and that will help us not to just align with the SDGs, but also our national sectoral development plans, as well as other global commitments. And this process will also help in South-South cooperation. We'll be able to share this experience with our regional and global peers. Having said that, I'd like to highlight today that the central role of the government's leadership, as I mentioned, the INFF implementation process was approached in a very deliberate manner within the government, and that was thanks to the technical support that we received through the financing for SIDS of DESA. There we had an expert consultant that was able to assist our economics ministry.